Welcome to the very first episode of Cruiseday Tuesdays with Petra Ryberg. So for those of you guys that saw our first webinar last week with Petu and Mike Oliver, the plan is we're going to run a fortnightly podcast with panelists, and then in between that, we're going to interview someone that the industry just really wants to find out a little bit more about. So this week, we've got a good friend of ours, Petra Ryberg. I'll hand over you to introduce yourself.
Hi, Toby. So good to see you. Yeah, thank you for having me. But yeah, I'm Petra Ryberg, live in Sydney, currently in my home, heading up the design department for P&O Australia, where I work closely with contractors, operational, do everything from the concepts to the sketching of the rooms to actually staying on board the ships when we do our renovations.
Very good. So how roughly size of fleet now? What you guys got? How many ships?
We currently have three ships in our fleet, and we're ready to take another 2 over. So we're excited about that.
Very good. Excellent. Okay, so the idea is we're about 15-20 minutes that we'll talk for. We've sent an email out to all of our audience asking them some of the things that they want to hear about you and from you, so we'll dive straight in.
Okay.
So first of all, Petra, obviously you've been involved in the event, in the industry, the community for a while now. What are you typically working on day to day? What is it you've been working on over the last few months?
First of all, that makes me sound old, but yes, it's been a couple of years now. What I'm working on now, I'm working on our next conversion, so Pacific Adventure. It's Golden Princess at the moment. So that will be a massive rebrand for us. Been working on that for 2 years. So really living, breathing it. We're getting to the point now where we're actually working on the shop drawings and going through the last bits and pieces of finalizing materials. I'm really excited. I'm actually doing the art selection for that ship as well. So yeah, finalizing the last bits of arts, and it's definitely keeping me busy. So,
yeah, absolutely. Okay. So I imagine that, before COVID-19, which, we can't not mention, you would be in the office in Sydney, finishing off all the final pieces. How has that changed now then? So, tell us a little bit about what your life looks like on lockdown, I'd imagine, in Sydney.
First of all, when we hit, I think, mid-February, I'd been in the office 3 days in that year. So I never work every day in the office. I'm always either on a plane, at an expo, or in a restaurant, or visiting a ship in somewhere. So I'm very used to working remotely. Like, I've actually done that for many years. So in terms of like my workflow, this doesn't really change much for me. The difference is if I was in the stage when I was selecting all materials, that would be hard to be without my library. But because we are in the stage of the project where I'm looking at drawings, and I can do that remotely. So the biggest change is not being on a plane, I guess, and not seeing my colleagues. But it's all right. In terms of work, I'm okay.
And I suppose the question there then is, if not being around your team, not being able to jump on a plane, where are you finding inspiration from? Where are you finding different materials, or what are you doing in terms of finding suppliers? How does that work when you're not able to travel?
I must say that this little, call it a break or whatever from your normal routine, it has really made me tap into my bank of experiences. Like, if you think about it, think about how many planes you were on last year, and we keep running pretty quickly. And I find myself that when you stop, you get the most creative. So it's almost like all my impressions in the last year just kind of comes to me now. And I'm feeling extremely inspired and creative at the moment. And I think it's just because I've had time to really like think about it and digest all that information and experiences we've had. So definitely, everyone I met in the last couple of years, all the suppliers I worked with, all that comes together, and it's just something that comes out now. Like, that's inspiring me at the moment.
Yeah. So you mentioned your suppliers, and there's no question that we'll have a lot of our exhibitors, the community watching this. what's the sort of advice you would give to, let's say, someone that's in the cruise industry? They're a supplier of maybe a carpet or a textile or a piece of furniture, lighting. What's the one thing that you would say to these guys that they could be doing right now in this period of break, as you say?
I think reflection over how you do and deal with your projects. Like if I start designing a space, I break it down. So say if I design a cabin, I would go in and be like, okay, what do we have in this space? We have a bed. Here's a bed sheet. Here's a hair dryer. We have a carpet, and all those little elements to me is a potential of a design element. And not saying all of them would be, but it might be like, wow, the sheets might be a unique way of branding something. So to the suppliers, I would tell, like, break through your process of how do you run a project. Number one might be client contact. Number two might be a quote send out. And number three is, okay, we start in the communication. And any way you can get more organized and actually like break down those things and be a bit critical to your own process of like, maybe we should send out an issue sheet with every shop drawing we send out. That would maybe help our client. If I would pick up the phone twice as much during the project time, maybe we get a better result. So I would just analyze it, and I mean, also like reach out to me or to anyone if you want the input from us of what I think could be done better.
Yeah. So look at all of the step-by-step process of reaching out to someone, trying to get in you know, in their library, if you will, and just trying to improve every single part of that process is your advice.
Yeah, and another thing, you know, there's so many suppliers out there. I realize that there's a lot knocking on the door, and I understand it could be really hard as a supplier. How do you break through there? And maybe this is an excellent time to do that. Maybe start a design collaboration. I mean, we have great designers in the forum and, you know, on the advisory board. And if you come and tell me, could you design 3 fabrics for us now? You know, that will be a way to really sustain the contact over this period. It'll be a way to find out a little bit what our style is, which would probably give you a bigger chance to get specified. And yeah, just work with each other and let's understand each other.
And that's a really good point, actually, when you say work with the designer to create a collection. It's something you see a lot in sort of hospitality design, but I haven't seen as much of it in cruise design, especially for, you know, a cruise related supplier with a cruise specific designer. So that's actually a really good bit of advice. I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of activity if people are watching this, reaching out to designers and looking at that. I think that's a great takeaway.
Because it's a way of, you know, one thing we never have enough of normally is time. Like that's always a big argument. So what if you now use this time to get to the point where you get the quality right and you have time to evaluate exactly what you need for your brand, and then once we get back to normal, which I'm sure we will, hopefully soon, you know, it's almost to press that button, you'll be like, cool, I know what they need.
Yeah, because you've done all that homework and that groundwork when there was this period of quiet.
Yeah, excellent. I think that's
so that's a really good bit of advice. What else? I mean, when we look at priorities for you guys then, and that's, you know, P&O Australia in particular, what's some of the sort of key priorities that you're looking at the moment from a design point of view? I mean, we were speaking recently, you know, if you think about sustainability, you think about hygiene, health, what are the sort of things that you look for in a design?
I think obviously environment is always on top of us, safety and health along with that, and that's obviously not going to get less important. But if we put the situation away from it, from a design perspective, you know, I'm a strong believer about how a space make you feel, and that's always what I've been designing from, rather than following a certain trend of a specific color or something going on. I think if you walk into a space that makes you feel good, that's something you want to return to. So for me, that needs to be done with all the different senses and with a holistic design. So if you walk into a space that looks great, but there's a horrible smell, you're not gonna love being in that space. So you need to nail those things together. And I think along with, if it's too noisy, so like noise, obviously, you get it from the scents. If you're in a restaurant, you taste or the drinks, and space planning. I really focus a lot on opening up to conversation when I space plan. And I don't know, I think everyone has experienced when you walk into a space and it feels a little bit awkward, like, am I gonna sit here, but then I'm not facing that person? And that's something that that's the center and core thing when I design, that I want everyone to feel relaxed when they sit down and open up the conversation.
And on the subject of space planning then, I mean, I think there's no question, we spoke about it in last week's webinar, that there will be a time when not just cruise lines but hotels and other restaurants will have to really focus on how people are sitting and how close they are because of social distancing measures. I mean, how do you think these sort of things will impact the way that spaces are designed on cruise ships?
I have no clue of what that's going to be, but I'm sure there will be something, and that's something we would all need to work together on thinking a bit outside of the box. And I don't have the answer right now, but again, I would try to use my method as well, of like breaking down every single bit in an experience of like what happens when you go aboard a ship. Okay, you get to the terminal, the security screening, break all the bits down, and maybe then like comment on every single bit, and like, how does it look when you enter that restaurant? I know in buffet areas, will there be buffet areas? I don't know. You have to have hand washing stations already. Like, is that something we're going to see more of? I don't know, but I'm assuming there will be something different.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. So I suppose on the subject of that then, we spoke a bit about antimicrobial fabrics, and when you were in Barcelona last year, we had a lot of fun walking around and meeting the textiles and all the suppliers, and we were talking about the different rub counts and stuff. I mean, are you already seeing an increase in textiles and fabric companies coming to you with that solution already in place, antimicrobial, antiviral?
Yeah, first of all, good job for picking up on the lingo with the rub test.
I'm getting better at this.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely the shift that you're seeing in your inbox now. Like, most of the major firms are sending out information, which is obviously great, about new materials and surfaces. And I think it also, we need to communicate, we need to understand each other. And I think that's when we all need to come in as one gathered industry and try to make the best out of it. I want to, if I can help a supplier to understand how we're using the surfaces and the space, and if that makes them be able to produce a material that can service for that, I think that's the goal. Because I'm certainly not a scientist. Like, I wouldn't know what is the next step that could be invented.
Yeah.
But yeah.
For sure. And then I suppose the next thing then is there anything you're not seeing from the supply chain at the moment? Is there any sort of any products, anything that you've been looking for that just hasn't been out there that you would encourage any companies to be looking at whilst we're in this quiet period?
I think for me, regulations and boundaries, or the thing, we have very strict regulations in the cruise industry, as you know. I'm sure you picked up on IMO as well by now.
Yes.
That's always almost been a trigger of creativity for me. So it's been like, right, so I only have this amount of selections compared to land-based. Now it's time to get really creative with contrast and colors, and in the last 5 years, I think our options has exploded as well. So in terms of like fabrics and laminates and all that, I feel like, I mean, obviously finding new collections is always great, but I feel like there's quite a lot of choice out there. The one major thing I think I'm really struggling with is when we take over a bit of older ships and, you know, rebrand. And when, say, a ship has been built 20 years ago, it might be operating on a halogen lighting system, and that's something I'm struggling with, because then you come in designing it and want to put on an LED lamp, and suddenly that's not on a dimmable circuit because the ship is built for halogen. And that would be an innovation, like a simple, straightforward innovation that will definitely pop a bottle of champagne to celebrate.
And is that down to the lighting companies to produce something that's halogen and what you're looking for, or is that down to the electrical company that can change that over? How would you see that happening?
I think it's quite complex. I think it's definitely about the system that is on board the ships. But I think it's also something everyone is struggling with that are renovating an older ship. And another part of what I truly believe in design is to obviously creating the best environment and experience as possible for our guests. But in order to do that, I also think a smooth operation needs to be behind that. And I ideally would like to have, and I know that's out there with the, you know, dimmer panels that you can just have. I just want 4 settings: morning, lunch, evening, cleaning mode. But I find it tricky when you have an older system and then installing new lights that are not, you know, on the same circuit, and it's LED mixed with halogen. And if that would be an easy solution, and it's different from land-based and ships as well. So it needs to be someone definitely with a lot of electrical background, understanding the ships.
Yeah. So I do have a question from one of our audience. The question is, once we are past this and you are starting to design new spaces, so let's, you know, say a couple of years time and you have a new ship that you're redesigning, would it help to have a database of all of the suppliers that do sell the antimicrobial, the anti-bac, all of the stuff that's just in one place for you to find, as opposed to having to go out to all of your suppliers and asking people, you know, what have you got that would suit this need?
But absolutely, that would be like, if it's a online library or whatever that gets updated, that would be amazing. And it would probably mean that I would find a lot of new fabric suppliers as well. And that's one thing that I'm always open to. I'm always like, just reach out to me, send me a message on LinkedIn, we'll talk. I would always try to find 5 minutes for a phone call or a coffee if you're in Sydney.
Yeah.
So if you don't put yourself out there, it's really hard to know about you. And there's too much options, and you kind of need to pick up that phone or send a message. So yeah, database would be amazing.
That is one thing that I've noticed with this industry, and, you know, I've not just been in the cruise industry, of course, is the willingness for, you know, really the designers or the buyers, the end users to help the supply chain. You know, I've worked in automotive before where you don't have that. The suppliers have got to really fight cold call, and they're not really they're not welcomed as much as they are within the cruise industry. We get a lot of companies that are not in the cruise industry, they're suppliers that want to sell to you guys. And it's been amazing to see, you know, Petu just say, you know, give us a call, pick the phone up, send me an email. Would you agree with that?
100%. I mean, you're never stronger than your suppliers, and we would be nothing without them. We wouldn't be able to do what we're doing without it. So I'm also a firm believer in it's always a two-way street. Like, if you're gonna do a project, you're only gonna get as good as how much you are willing to put into it as well. And there's no one out there that has all the answers if you're not giving them the time to invest in the project. So yeah, and I mean, if you're willing to open that door, I'm also some of my really, really good friends I've met through that way, and you know, I think you learn a lot from it. And as a designer, the more you immerse yourself in the produce and all the technical things that goes into a product, I really believe you become a better designer as well.
Yeah. Well, look, we've spoken a lot about the suppliers, which, as you've said, is a huge part of the community. What about new designers? I mean, we're seeing a lot of actual interior designers that are either fresh out of college or they've worked on some land-based projects. What's the sort of 1 or 2 pieces of advice you would give to them to, not only find inspiration, but sort of help find their way through, the minefield that is, the regulations that we've got?
Oh, and in terms of ship regulations?
Absolutely, yeah.
First of all, I'd never seen a cruise ship when I started designing for the ships. I don't think it necessarily has to be. My key thing has been finding a mentor. I was, lucky enough to work for Tilburg Design of Sweden, where I started the whole journey with designing ships. And before that, I designed hotels and restaurants, and I had never seen a cruise ship. But I think if you're a young designer coming out, if you have the passion and the drive, nothing is impossible. Like, you have a great forum here as well. Like, if you want to know more about ship design, cruise ship design in particular, please reach out. Like, find someone that's willing to walk you through the steps. And I mean, there's books about it and all that as well, but I don't think anything can beat working in a firm that is willing to teach you. And there's a lot of people out there that would love to lift. That's certainly one of my goals in my life. If I can lift someone else up, then that's done my day,
For sure, everyone should have a mentor. Me with events, you with design. Who's your who would you say has acted as that mentor for you then, Petra? Who's the person that you can go to for some sound advice?
Wow, there's actually a couple, and I feel very, very blessed to have them in my life. And one of them is my former boss, Fredrik Johansson from Tilburg.
Yeah.
And we chat quite regularly, and share some ideas and just experiences in the industry. And everyone that I became closer with from the cruise ship expo as well, like Mai and Petu and everyone in the Carnival Corporation group, we're certainly like a design family.
Absolutely.
But one of my current boss, Sture Myrmel, who's the president of Carnival Australia, is a very big inspiration. So yeah, he's definitely a mentor as well.
Yeah. So we were speaking recently about places you can go. So if you're a designer and you are looking for that massive hit of inspiration and the latest stuff that's going on, where would you say that some of the top places that a designer can go on holiday or for that inspiration?
I think everyone is different when it comes to inspiration as well, but I always, like, for me, the top place I love going to, and that's actually a hotel chain, and I'm like, doesn't matter where in the world, but I know that's when I'm going to find all the senses and that holistic design that I talked about, and that's the Soho houses around the world. It is a private membership club that you can visit their restaurants, and sometimes you're lucky enough to get a room when the celebrities have not booked in. But that to me really hits the mark.
That was Barcelona. You went to one in Barcelona then, right? I remember that.
Yeah. You're there, but you're busy. You missed out anyway. Otherwise, there are, in the bigger cities, there are great design centers. So I was lucky to have, when I worked in New York, where I did my first internships, they had literally a building that is the design house, and it's almost like walking into a big hotel, and every floor is differently designed, and it's just the fabric houses, everything you can think of. And similarly in London, you have the same, and those places I always found great, because I was an intern, and all the designers asked me to return the samples, which is hard work as well. Like, you spend hours going back returning the samples, but that was one of the best lessons ever, because I got to see all the different brands and meet the reps in all the showrooms and feel all the fabrics, and that really made me realize that that's what I wanted to work with.
Nice, excellent. Well, it's been great speaking to you, Petra. There's lots to take from there, and we'll pull out all the juicy bits, and I'm sure you'll see it all over social media soon. So have you got anything else you want to finish off? A message to the community, to not only your fellow cruise line designers, but the rest of the community?
I just want to, I'm just so proud of all of us to come together in this time, and even before COVID, we were a very strong community, and I really feel that feeling of wanting to lift each other, and all I can say is that I'm definitely here for any supplier, any new designer, any question. I think we're in this together now and after we're out of this. So let's just help each other and become the best community we can.
Absolutely. So I'll just finish off by saying, look, thanks for joining us. You've given some really good advice to the supply chain and other designers. And you may just see a database of all of the suppliers that can help fight against, pandemics or crises, whatever it might be. But watch this space. Okay, Petra. Well, thank you very much. Thanks, guys. See you next week for another episode of Cruise Conversations.
Thank you.